In 1984, the average Social Security retired worker check ran $460 a month. For a black widow in Detroit who had cleaned offices for 30 years, the number landed lower. After rent and the gas bill, she had about $12 a week for groceries. She kept a tin of carnation milk in your kind of cupboard and a smoked turkey neck in your kind of freezer. Number 19 on this list fed her for 3 days off one pot. Number 14 cost $1.40. Number 7 on this list used a can of pink salmon bought before the Reagan cuts hit. These 25 suppers were not party food. They were arithmetic, memory, and the kind of dignity your grandmother kept at a small table. Hit subscribe and stay with us. Here are the 25 quick 1980s soul food suppers black seniors made stretch a fixed income check across a long month. Number 25, pan-fried catfish with cornmeal crust. A grandmother in Greenville, Mississippi kept a brown paper bag of Aunt Jemima cornmeal mix on the back of the stove and a jar of bacon grease beside it. Catfish nuggets, the small cuts the fish house could not sell whole, ran 69 cents a pound at the corner market in 1983. She salted them, peppered them, dropped them into the bag, shook it twice, and laid them in a hot iron skillet with 2 spoons of grease. 4 minutes aside. The cornmeal crust crackled when she lifted them out. She set them on a folded grocery sack to drain and put a slice of Wonder Bread under each one to catch the oil. A glass of sweet tea on your side of the table. The plate cost her about 80 cents. The dignity was free. Your grandmother called it Friday and you ate 2 pieces. Number 24, fried bologna sandwich on Wonder Bread. A retired postal worker in Newark fried 2 slices of Oscar Mayer bologna in a dry pan until the edges curled up like a small bowl. He spread Mrs. Filbert's margarine on 2 slices of Wonder Bread and pressed the bologna between them with a slice of yellow American cheese. The cheese melted from the heat of the meat. He cut the sandwich on the diagonal because that was how his mother cut yours in Macon, Georgia in 1947. Bologna ran $1.19 a pound at the A&P. 1 pound made 6 sandwiches. He ate it standing at the counter with the radio tuned to the news. It was not country ham. It was not Sunday. It was Tuesday after the rent. If you grew up on this sandwich, you remember the way the cheese melted onto your fingers. Number 23, syrup biscuits for breakfast as supper. A widow in Birmingham mixed 2 cups of self-rising flour, a 1/4 cup of Crisco, and enough buttermilk to bring it together. She rolled the dough out on a square of waxed paper, cut biscuits with the rim of a Welch's jelly jar, and slid the pan into a 425 oven. 12 minutes. While they baked, she warmed Cairo dark syrup in a small saucepan with a knob of margarine until it was thin enough to pour. She split each hot biscuit, drizzled the syrup, and ate 2 for supper at 6 with a cup of Maxwell House coffee. The whole plate cost about 30 cents. Your great-grandmother had eaten the same thing in 1912 in rural Alabama when there was no meat. If you have ever had a hot biscuit with syrup standing in for supper, you know what your people were doing. The recipe was old. Your hunger was older. Number 22, tuna and rice casserole. A retired bus driver in Cleveland kept his pantry to 7 items by the middle of the month. 2 cans of chicken of the sea, a box of minute rice, a can of Campbell's cream of mushroom, a sleeve of saltines, evaporated milk, an onion, and a brick of government cheese. He chopped the onion, browned it in margarine, stirred in the rice, the soup, the milk, and a splash of water, then folded in the drained tuna and a handful of crumbled saltines. He grated the government cheese over the top and baked it covered for 30 minutes. The casserole came out hot and binding and quiet. It fed him for 3 nights. The pan went into the sink and stayed there until morning. If you ever lived alone, you know that the dishes wait. He had stopped washing them after dark when he stopped having a wife to tell about his day. Number 21, hot dogs and beans, the Vienna sausage variant. A grandmother in Cincinnati could not always afford a pack of ballpark franks at $1.29. When your check came up short, you reached for the small can. She opened a can of Armour Vienna sausages, drained the brine, sliced them into coins, and stirred them into a pot of Bush's pork and beans with a tablespoon of yellow mustard and a spoon of Domino brown sugar. The whole pot took 15 minutes. She ate it from a chipped Corelle bowl with a square of Jiffy cornbread on the side. Her grandsons called it puppy bowls because the sausage rounds looked like they had been scooped from a tin of dog food. They ate 3 helpings each. She never corrected them. Your pot was empty before the Andy Griffith rerun ended. Number 20, cornmeal mush, sliced and pan-fried. A widow in Memphis poured leftover breakfast mush into a loaf pan and slid it into the icebox before bed. By supper time, the mush had set into a yellow brick. She turned it out, sliced it into half-inch rounds, dredged each round in flour, and pan-fried them in a 1/4 inch of bacon grease until the edges turned crisp and gold. She topped them with Caro dark syrup or a spoon of Smucker's blackberry, preserves, and ate 4 slices with a cup of black coffee. The whole supper cost her about 15 cents. What most people miss is that this was breakfast turned inside out and made to last. Your people had eaten it in a tenant farmer's cabin in 1928. Your aunt ate it in a rooming house in Memphis in 1953. The recipe had outlived 3 different stoves. Number 19, Spam and rice with onion gravy. A retired shipyard welder in Newport News kept a blue can of Spam in his pantry the way other men kept the Bible. He sliced it thin, browned the slices until the edges blackened, then set them aside. In the same skillet, he sweated a yellow onion in the Spam fat, stirred in 2 spoons of flour, and poured in a cup of water and a spoon of kitchen bouquet. The gravy thickened in 3 minutes. He laid the Spam over a plate of Uncle Ben's rice and ladled the gravy over the top. A can of Spam ran 99 cents. The plate fed him twice. The Navy had served him SOS on a Tuesday in 1968. He still ate it on a Tuesday. Your body remembers the comfort that fed it longest. Number 18, liver and onions with smothered gravy. Beef liver was the cheapest protein on the meat counter in 1985, 49 cents a pound at Kroger. A grandmother in Gary, Indiana, soaked the slices in a bowl of carnation evaporated milk for an hour to take the bite out, dredged them in seasoned flour, and laid them in a hot iron skillet with 2 slices of bacon for the grease. She browned the liver 3 minutes aside, lifted it onto a plate, then cooked 2 yellow onions slow in the same pan until they turned the color of brown sugar. A spoon of flour, a cup of water. The gravy came together in 5 minutes. She poured it over the liver and served it with a scoop of mashed potatoes made from Carnation Instant. Her doctor said her iron count was better than her daughter's. If you ever ate this plate as a child, you remember the smell of the onions cooking. She did not tell the doctor why. Number 17, smothered pork chops with rice and gravy. End-cut pork chops ran 89 cents a pound at the Piggly Wiggly in 1984, and a grandmother in Atlanta bought 4 of them on a Tuesday because Tuesday was when she let herself remember what Sunday used to taste like. She seasoned the chops with Lawry's, dredged them in flour, and browned them hard in Crisco until the bottom of the pan went brown and sticky. She lifted the chops out, sweated a chopped onion in the drippings, stirred in 3 spoons of flour, and poured in a cup of water and a splash of evaporated milk. The gravy turned the color of pecan shells. She nestled the chops back in, covered the pan, and let it simmer 40 minutes on the lowest flame. A pot of rice on the back burner. Your Sunday supper on a Tuesday. She set 2 plates out of habit. She ate from one and said grace anyway. Number 16, salmon croquettes from a can of pink salmon. A can of double Q pink salmon ran $1.19 at the Kroger in 1984, and one can made 6 patties. A grandmother in Jackson, Mississippi, opened the can, picked out the round bone, and crumbled it back into the flesh because that was where the calcium hid, and added a chopped onion, 2 beaten eggs, a handful of yellow cornmeal, and a shake of Laurie's seasoned salt. She formed the mix into 6 fat discs and pan-fried them in a 1/4 inch of Crisco until the cornmeal crust went deep gold. 3 minutes aside, she served them with white rice, pinto beans, and a slice of Wonder Bread folded in half. 6 patties, 2 suppers, 1 small dignity. Her mother had taught her in 1947. She had taught your mother in 1971. The can looked the same in every kitchen you walked into. Number 15, sweet potato pone, the cheap version. The Sunday version called for pecans and butter and brown sugar by the cup. The Tuesday version, the senior on a fixed check version, called for what was already on the counter. A grandmother in Charleston grated 3 sweet potatoes on the wide side of her box grater, beat in 2 eggs, half a cup of carnation evaporated milk, a 1/4 cup of Domino sugar, a splash of vanilla, and a handful of self-rising flour. She poured the batter into a buttered iron skillet and slid it into a 350 oven for 45 minutes. No pecans, no bourbon, no glaze. The top went burnt orange and crackled like a leaf. The middle stayed soft and almost custard. She ate a square hot from the skillet with a cup of black coffee on the porch and watched the sun go behind the live oaks. Your people had been making it like this since 1865. Tradition does not need pecans. Tradition needs your hands. Number 14, hoe cakes and Johnny cakes. 2 ingredients, white cornmeal and boiling water. A pinch of salt if the cupboard was generous. A retired sleeping car porter in Southside Chicago mixed a cup of Aunt Jemima cornmeal with a cup of boiling water until the batter held together like wet sand, dropped it by the spoonful into a hot iron skillet greased with bacon fat, and pressed each cake flat with the back of the spoon. 3 minutes aside, the edges crisped. The middles stayed soft. He ate 4 hoe cakes with a smear of margarine and a cup of Potlikker from the greens pot. The whole supper cost about 14 cents. Your great-great-grandmother had cooked the same hoe cakes on a flat hoe over a fire in Mississippi in 1898. The hoe was gone. The recipe was not. A senior with 2 ingredients and 1 skillet was never out of supper. The math was older than you. Number 13, fried green tomatoes at the end of summer. The last green tomatoes hung on the vines in late September, too cold to ripen, too good to waste. A grandmother in Birmingham picked them, sliced them a 1/4 inch thick, salted them, and let them sweat on a paper towel for 10 minutes. She dredged each slice in seasoned cornmeal and pan-fried them in bacon grease until the cornmeal went bronze and the inside went tender. 3 minutes aside, she ate 6 slices with a piece of Wonder Bread and a glass of buttermilk. Free if she grew them. 20 cents a pound at the curb market if she did not. If you ever stood at the screen door waiting for the smell, you know this kind of supper was the cheapest kind of joy. The garden told her what supper was. The skillet did the rest. Number 12, smothered cabbage with smoked turkey wing. Cabbage was 19 cents a pound in 1985, and a smoked turkey wing ran about $1.50. A grandmother in Detroit dropped the wing into a heavy pot with 4 cups of water and let it simmer an hour until the broth turned smoky and the meat fell off the bone. She pulled the wing out, shredded the meat back into the pot, and added a head of cabbage chopped rough, a yellow onion, a teaspoon of red pepper flakes, and a spoon of Crisco. 40 minutes covered on a low flame. The cabbage went silky. The pot lacquer went gold. She served it over a scoop of Uncle Ben's rice with a square of Jiffy cornbread on the side. The whole pot fed her 4 nights. She froze 2 portions. For the weekend, her grandson came up from Memphis. Smoked turkey was the late 70s adjustment after the price of a ham hock had climbed past your budget. The flavor stayed, the bone changed. Number 11, black-eyed peas and hot links. New Year's Day in a senior's kitchen in Memphis ran on a 1-pound bag of camellia black-eyed peas at 59 cents and a pack of Earl Campbell hot links at $2. She soaked the peas overnight in a metal bowl, drained them in the morning, and dropped them into a pot with 6 cups of water, a chopped onion, 2 cloves of garlic, and the hot links sliced into thumb-sized rounds. She let it simmer 2 hours uncovered until the peas went soft and the broth turned deep red from the link grease. A spoon of Crystal hot sauce at the end, a square of cornbread on the side. The peas were for luck. The links were for the people who needed something with bite. She had been cooking the same pot every January 1st since 1959. The peas had outlasted the husband, the move, and the cut to her check. They were still on your grandmother's table on January 1st, 1986, with the radio playing. Number 10, pinto beans and neck bones. A pound of pork neck bones ran 69 cents at the Kroger's in Atlanta in 1983. A pound of dry pinto beans ran 49 cents. A grandmother in West End rinsed the beans, dropped them into a heavy pot with the neck bones, 8 cups of water, a chopped onion, and 3 cloves of garlic. She set the flame on low and walked away. 3 hours later, her kitchen smelled like a Sunday at her own grandmother's table in 1933. The neck bones gave up their meat. The potlikker thickened on its own. She ladled the beans over a scoop of white rice and tore a square of cornbread to push the beans onto your spoon. The whole pot fed her 4 nights. $2 in groceries, 12 meals. A pot like that was not a recipe. It was your inheritance with a bone in it. Number 9, smothered turkey wings with rice. A pack of 3 turkey wings at the corner store in Cleveland ran $2 in 1985, more than chicken parts, less than pork chops. A grandmother seasoned the wings hard with Lawry's, garlic powder, and black pepper, dredged them in seasoned flour, and browned them in a deep iron skillet for 10 minutes aside. She lifted them out, sweated 2 yellow onions and a chopped bell pepper in the drippings, stirred in 4 spoons of flour, and poured in 3 cups of water and a splash of kitchen bouquet. The gravy thickened to the color of strong tea. She nestled the wings back in, covered the pan, and let it simmer an hour and 20 minutes until the meat slid off the bone. Her kitchen filled with the smell of brown gravy in slow time. She served the wings over a scoop of Uncle Ben's. Rice with a side of canned green beans, warm with a knob of margarine. 3 wings, 2 suppers, 1 pot. The seniors who learned to brown a piece of meat properly never went hungry. Your grandmother went on cooking long after the world stopped expecting her to. Number 8, chicken and dumplings, the cheap parts version. Chicken backs ran 29 cents a pound at the meat counter in Memphis in 1984. A grandmother dropped 1.5 pounds into a heavy pot with 8 cups of water, a chopped onion, 2 stalks of celery, 3 peppercorns, and a bay leaf. She simmered it 90 minutes, pulled the bones out, picked the meat off, and strained the broth back into the pot. Then she made the dumplings. 2 cups of self-rising flour, a 1/4 cup of Crisco, and enough buttermilk to bring it into a shaggy ball. She rolled it thin on the counter, cut it into ragged squares with a butter knife, and dropped the squares into the simmering broth one by one. 20 minutes covered. The dumplings puffed up tender and pale. She ladled it into a bowl with a scoop of the picked chicken meat. The whole pot ran her about 80 cents and fed her 3 suppers. Your grandmother had made it the same way in 1949 when grief sat at her table. Number 7, salmon patties and pinto beans, the full plate. A retired school teacher in Memphis served salmon patties and pinto beans together as one plate, a habit she had carried up from the Mississippi Delta in 1962. The patties came from a single can of double Q pink salmon, the beans from a pot she had simmered the day before. She ladled a scoop of beans onto the left side of the plate, set 2 hot patties on the right, and tucked a square of hot water cornbread between them like a small wall, a spoon of Potlikker over the beans, a glass of buttermilk on the side. The plate ran her about $1.20 in 1985. She ate it watching the 6 o'clock news. The patties hissed when she set them on the plate. The beans pooled around the cornbread. The buttermilk went down cold. A senior with 1 can and 1 pot had a plate that did not look like poverty. To you and to her, it looked like dinner. Number 6, greens cooked all day with a smoked turkey neck. 2 pounds of collard greens ran 69 cents a pound at the corner market in Atlanta in 1985. A smoked turkey neck ran $1.20. A grandmother in Vine City started the pot in the morning. She dropped the turkey neck into 8 cups of water with a halved onion and a clove of garlic and let it simmer 90 minutes until the broth turned the color of weak coffee and your kitchen smelled like the back room of a smokehouse. She washed the greens 3 times in the sink to get the grit out, stripped the tough stems, stacked the leaves, and rolled them tight before slicing them ribbon thin. Into the pot, a teaspoon of red pepper flakes, a splash of cane vinegar. The lid went on. She let it cook 3 more hours on the lowest flame, stirring once an hour. By supper time, the greens had collapsed into a tangle and the Potlikker had gone dark and shining. She poured a cup of Potlikker into a coffee mug and drank it at the counter. That was the cook's portion. The greens went over rice with a square of hot water cornbread to soak up the rest. Smoked turkey neck was the 1980s adjustment after a ham hock had climbed past $2. What most people miss is that what changed was the bone, and what stayed was everything that mattered. The recipe was older than the country. It had been carried from West Africa, where greens cooked with smoked meat were already a method by 1700. It had survived the plantation, the tenant farm, the kitchenette in Bronzeville, and the small apartment off Northside Drive, where a 78-year-old woman ate a bowl of it with cornbread and sweet tea on a Tuesday alone with the news on low. The Potlikker was your inheritance. The neck was the receipt. The greens were the proof that a poor woman with a heavy pot could feed herself like she still mattered. Number 5, government cheese grits. The 5-pound block of processed American cheese arrived from the church food pantry in a cardboard box marked USDA. A grandmother in Toledo brought it home, unwrapped the foil, and set it in your kind of icebox where she could see it. At supper time, she boiled 4 cups of water, stirred in a cup of Quaker quick grits and a pinch of salt, lowered the flame, and cooked the grits 20 minutes until they thickened and pulled away from the pot. She grated half a pound of government cheese into the pot, stirred until it melted into the grits like cream into coffee, and finished it with a knob of margarine and a crack of black pepper. The grits went the color of butter. She ate a deep bowl with a slice of Wonder Bread on the side. The cheese was free. The grits ran 59 cents a box. Your plate cost almost nothing. The taste was richer than anything she had bought herself in 2 months. Reagan called it surplus. She called it Tuesday. Number 4, hot water cornbread with Potlikker. A grandmother in the Mississippi Delta Poured a cup of boiling water over a cup of fine yellow cornmeal, stirred in a pinch of salt, and let the batter sit 2 minutes until it thickened. She dropped the batter by the spoonful into a hot iron skillet with a 1/4 inch of bacon grease and pressed each spoonful flat. 3 minutes aside, the edges went lace crisp, the middles stayed steamy and soft. She ladled a deep bowl of potlikker from the back burner where the greens were still simmering, set 2 cornbread cakes on a saucer beside the bowl, and sat down at the table. She broke off a piece of cornbread and dipped it into the potlikker. The cornbread soaked the broth like a sponge. Cornmeal cost 29 cents a pound. The supper cost almost nothing. Your recipe came across an ocean, survived a plantation, walked north on the Illinois Central, and ended up on her saucer in 1986. She ate slow. Number 3, smothered chicken backs and gravy. Chicken backs ran 29 cents a pound at the West Side Market in Cleveland in 1984. A grandmother bought 2 pounds, seasoned them hard with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and a shake of Lawry's, and dredged them in seasoned flour. She browned them in a 1/4 inch of Crisco for 10 minutes aside until the skin went mahogany and the bottom of the pan went brown. She lifted the backs onto a plate, sweated a chopped onion in the drippings, stirred in 3 spoons of flour, and poured in 2 cups of water and a splash of kitchen bouquet. The gravy turned the color of strong tea. She nestled the backs back in, covered the pan, and let it simmer 40 minutes on the lowest flame. The meat fell off the bone. The gravy thickened on its own. She served the backs over rice with a side of canned green beans, 2 pounds of backs, 3 suppers, 60 cents in meat. Your bones went into a freezer bag for next week's pot. Number 2, oxtail stew before the price climbed. Oxtail in 1981 ran $1.29 a pound at the corner butcher in Brooklyn. By 1989, it had climbed past $4. A grandmother who learned to cook it before the climb made the most of the years she had. She seasoned the oxtail joints with salt, pepper, and Lawry's, browned them hard in a heavy pot for 15 minutes, then added a chopped onion, 3 cloves of garlic, a carrot, 2 stalks of celery, a bay leaf, and 6 cups of water. She covered the pot and let it simmer 3 hours on the lowest flame until the meat slid off the bone and the broth went the color of burnt sugar. The last 20 minutes, she dropped in a peeled potato cut into chunks. She served the stew over rice in a deep bowl with cornbread on the side. The body gave her supper for 4 nights. By the time oxtail crossed $3 a pound, she had switched to neck bones. Your pot stayed the same. Number 1, pan-fried liver pudding. In the Carolina Piedmont, a roll of liver pudding from a country grocery ran $1.19 in 1984 and lasted a single senior the better part of a week. A grandmother in Greensboro sliced the pudding into 1/2-inch rounds, dredged them in flour, and pan-fried them in 2 spoons of bacon grease for 3 minutes aside until the edges crisped and the middle stayed soft as pate. She slid 2 rounds onto a square of Wonder Bread, smeared a stripe of yellow mustard across the top, and folded the bread in half. A glass of cheerwine on the table, a spoon of Smucker's apple butter on the side for the second slice. The whole supper cost about 30 cents. Your great-grandfather had eaten the same sandwich on a tobacco farm in 1934. She had eaten it in 1955 when she first moved to Greensboro. She was eating it now alone in 1986 with the television on a low blue glow. The recipe was regional. Your need for it was not. Number 20, fried okra and potatoes. In the deep South, okra grew in every backyard garden from June through October. You sliced it thin, diced the potato, and fried them together in cast iron with bacon grease until the okra turned crisp and the potatoes turned golden. A dusting of cornmeal kept the okra from getting slimy. That was it. The roots of okra trace directly to West Africa, where the plant had been cultivated for centuries before it crossed the Atlantic. For a senior with a garden, this meal was free. A pound of okra cost 49 cents in 1986 at the store. The bacon grease was saved from breakfast, sitting in the coffee can beside the stove. A retired nurse in Montgomery made fried okra and potatoes every Tuesday from May through September for 15 years. She said, "Summer had a taste. This was it." Fried pork chops with pan drippings, gravy was built entirely on technique, and the technique lived in her hands. Blade cut chops, the thin, bony ones that cost next to nothing, got seasoned hard, pressed into flour until coated white, then laid into hot lard with a sharp crack and hiss that meant the temperature was right. She'd cook them through until the crust was deep brown, then set them aside on a plate. Every bit of brown flour, rendered fat, and caramelized seasoning stuck to that cast iron was the foundation of what came next. Cold water went in, not broth, just water, and she'd work the bottom with a wooden spoon until everything loosened and rose up into the liquid, the heat pulling it all into a gravy that thickened on its own with no roux, no extra flour, just what the chops had left behind. If you had to ask how much water, you weren't ready to make it. She is gone now. That specific ratio of drippings to water, the one that made it taste like nothing else, left with her, and it has not come back. Number 23, chitlins with vinegar and hot sauce. This was the supper that tied a black family in Chicago directly back to a farm in the Delta, because chitlins were the part of the hog white folks had always thrown away. A woman on East Garfield would buy 10 pounds of chitterlings from the corner meat market for about 39 cents a pound, clean them in her kitchen sink for 3 hours, and simmer them on a low flame with an onion, a whole clove of garlic, and a bay leaf for 4 hours. The apartment would smell for 2 days. She served them in a shallow bowl with white vinegar and a bottle of red hot sauce, a slice of white bread on the saucer to sop up the Potlikker. Number 16, skillet candied yams. Sweet potatoes were the cheapest vegetable in the southern grocery store for most of the century. You peeled and sliced them, laid them in a skillet with the butter, brown sugar, water, and cinnamon. Covered on low for 30 minutes, the yams softened and the sugar turned into a thick golden glaze. No oven, no baking dish to wash. A pound cost 19 cents in 1985. For a senior who missed holiday cooking, skillet candied yams brought Thanksgiving to a Tuesday night. A retired seamstress in Selma made them every week because her late husband had loved them. She set his place at the table when she ate them. Some meals are not about feeding yourself. They are about remembering the person you used to feed. The pinto bean pot was a Monday institution in African American households because Monday was wash day, the day the laundry needed tending from morning to dusk, and nothing on the stove could require constant attention. Dried pintos, soaked overnight, went into the pot first thing with a block of fatback rinsed to knock off some of the salt. The fatback rendered down over hours, its fat releasing slowly into the bean water and turning the whole pot silky in a way no seasoning packet could replicate. She'd set it on the back burner at the lowest heat and leave it alone until late afternoon, adding water once or twice when the level dropped. By supper time, the beans had absorbed everything the fatback had given, the Potlikker had gone thick and starchy, and the whole house smelled of something deep and slow and patient. Cornbread went into the cast iron around 4:30. Supper was on the table by 5, and nobody had to ask what was for dinner because they'd been smelling it since 9 in the morning. The Monday bean pot didn't need a recipe. It needed a whole day and the kind of patience that doesn't pass down easily anymore. Number 24, sweet potato pie supper. On the South Side in the 1960s, There were nights when the pie was the whole supper because the pie was what was left. A grandmother on South Wabash would buy a 5-pound bag of sweet potatoes for 29 cents, boil them in a dented pot on a hot plate, and mash them with evaporated milk, sugar, nutmeg, and a hard pat of butter. She rolled the crust out on a piece of waxed paper because her kitchen had no counter. The pie baked in a borrowed oven down the hall. She served slices warm on saucers with a glass of cold milk. You sat at the kitchen table in your school clothes and you ate dessert for dinner, and nobody in the apartment called it strange. Nobody called it a hardship either. It was Tuesday. The rent was due Friday. The pie was beautiful. Back then, a pie could be a supper, and a supper could be a love letter. Number 23, sardines and grits skillet. Most people under 40 have never eaten sardines on purpose. But for black seniors who grew up in the rural South, a can of sardines was a meal in itself. You cooked your grits in the skillet with water and salt until they thickened. Then you laid the sardines on top and added hot sauce. A can cost 25 cents in 1978. A pound of grits cost 35 cents and lasted 2 weeks. For a senior with arthritis who could not grip a knife or handle raw meat, this was the world's easiest hot supper. You opened a can, you stirred a skillet, you sat down and ate. A retired domestic worker in Greenville, South Carolina, ate sardines and grits 4 nights a week for 6 years after her husband's passing in 1982. She said the meal reminded her of her father, who ate the same thing every night after working the tobacco fields. And if the okra pot was the supper built from what the garden gave up, the navy bean soup was the supper built from what the pantry held steady. Dried navy beans went in after an overnight soak, brought to a boil, and dropped to the lowest simmer the gas burner could manage. Smoked turkey next went in early, not as garnish, but as the whole foundation of flavor. And over 4 or 5 hours, they released their smoke and collagen and deep savory fat until the broth had transformed into something else entirely. By late afternoon, the beans had softened and begun to break apart at the edges, thickening the liquid from the inside. The pot turned a deep, cloudy tan that meant it was nearly ready. She'd taste it, adjust the salt, maybe add another pinch of black pepper. Bowls came out with cornbread on the side and a splash of hot sauce if you wanted it. There was no recipe for this soup. There was a turkey neck, a bag of beans, a pot, and a woman who made it enough times to know it was done by the color of the broth and the way the kitchen smelled after the 3rd hour. Number 21, hog head cheese. Hog head cheese was Souse's country cousin, denser, more peppery, and shaped like a brick. A butcher on 63rd Street would sell a whole hog head for 75 cents in 1962, and a grandmother from Greenville, Mississippi would carry it home on the bus wrapped in newspaper. She boiled it with salt, black pepper, sage, red pepper, and a cup of cider vinegar until the meat slipped from the skull. She chopped the meat fine, packed it into a bread pan, poured the reduced broth on top, and weighted it down overnight with a flat iron. Sliced thick and eaten on Saturday afternoon with white onion, it was the supper of men who had worked a half day at the rolling mill. It fed 4 grown adults for a full week. Picture that arithmetic. Picture what that skill meant in a kitchenette with no refrigerator and 1 burner. Number 19, egg and tomato skillet. This was the meal a Delta grandmother made when there was almost nothing left. A can of tomatoes poured into a hot skillet with onion and a pinch of sugar to cut the acid. When it started bubbling, she cracked 2 eggs right into the sauce and covered the skillet until the white set. You scooped it onto toast or a hoe cake. A can of tomatoes cost 29 cents in 1980. Eggs cost 59 cents a dozen. The whole meal cost less than 15 cents. In the rural Black South, nobody called it anything fancy. They called it eggs and tomatoes. A retired cotton gin worker in Clarksdale made this 3 mornings a week and twice for supper. She said breakfast food for dinner was not laziness, it was freedom. You cooked what you wanted when the house was yours alone. Smothered chicken and rice was the supper that could silence a table full of hungry people in 30 seconds. She'd cut the chicken herself, season every surface hard with salt, black pepper, garlic powder, and paprika, dredge each piece in flour, and set it in hot lard until the skin turned a deep, crackling gold. When the chicken came out, every brown bit and rendered drop of fat stayed in the skillet. Sliced onions went in, stirred and scraped until they softened and picked up all that color from the bottom of the pan. Water went in next, the flour from the dredging thickening it as it simmered. And then the chicken went back in with the lid on low for 45 minutes until the meat had pulled from the bone and the gravy had gone deep brown and rich. Over long grain white rice, it was a supper that cost almost nothing and tasted like it cost everything. The last person who made it exactly right has been gone a long time. That gravy has never been quite the same since, no matter how many times someone tries. Old timers from Alabama came from 3 buildings over when they heard she was cooking. They sat at her card table and they did not speak for the first bowl. That was reverence. That was a memory you could chew. Number 22, souse with saltines. Souse was the jellied meatloaf your grandmother made out of pig trotters, ears, and snout, and it lived in the icebox on the top shelf wrapped in wax paper. A woman on Indiana Avenue, born in Selma, would boil the parts with vinegar, red pepper flakes, bay leaf, and a whole onion for 5 hours, pick the meat off the bones, and pour the spice broth over it in a loaf pan. By morning, it had set into a cold, savory jelly. She sliced it thin and laid it on saltine crackers with a dab of yellow mustard. It was breakfast, lunch, or a supper eaten standing up before a night shift at the stockyards. A pound of souse cost about 15 cents to make and fed a grown man for 3 days. It is easy to forget that food like this was survival engineering handed down through generations. Number 24, chicken fried rice. This was not the kind you ordered from a takeout window. This was the kind a grandmother in Oakland made on a Wednesday night with yesterday's rice and a chicken thigh that cost 35 cents. She diced the chicken, fried it until it browned, pushed it aside and scrambled an egg in the same pan. The cold rice went in. Next, tossed with soy sauce and whatever was in the crisper. Half an onion, a handful of frozen peas. 10 minutes and the skillet smelled like a restaurant but cost less than $1. During the 1970s, Black families in Oakland, Chicago, and Detroit adopted fried rice from Chinese American restaurants in their neighborhoods. Yesterday's leftovers became tonight's supper. That was the whole point. Stuffed bell peppers with rice and ground beef were how she turned a 1/4 pound of meat into supper for 5 people without anyone at the table noticing the math. Green peppers got their tops cut off and seeds scooped out, then stood upright in a baking dish like cups waiting to be filled. The filling was where the calculation lived: ground beef browned with diced onion, then mixed with cooked white rice at a ratio that he tilted hard toward the rice, sometimes 2 cups to every half cup of meat, stretched further with tomato sauce stirred through. She'd taste it, adjust the salt, add garlic powder and black pepper, then pack each pepper until the filling mounded above the rim. A spoonful of sauce went over the top of each one before the dish went uncovered into a 350-degree oven where it stayed until the peppers softened and the tops browned slightly. The finished dish looked like abundance, a full pepper per person, steaming, smelling of tomato and browned meat. Nobody could tell how far the meat had been stretched. She never told. You never asked. That was the agreement in those kitchens. Number 20, chicken and dumplings. A widow on South Michigan Avenue made this every other Wednesday from a single whole chicken that cost about $1.20 at the Woolworth grocery counter. She boiled the bird with celery tops, 1 onion, and salt until the meat fell off, pulled the bones out, and dropped spoonfuls of flour and buttermilk dough into the simmering broth. The dumplings swelled soft and pillowy, soaking up the chicken flavor as they cooked. She ladled them into a deep bowl, set it on a lace doily in front of her nephew, and watched him eat without saying a word. A single pot fed her for 6 days straight. The apartment smelled like someone still cared enough to cook for you. That kind of quiet love does not need a recipe card. It only needs a pot and a reason to keep going. Go back to that Black Widow in Detroit. $12 a week, a smoked turkey neck in your freezer, and a tin of carnation in your cupboard. These 25 suppers were the steady hand of a woman who had cooked for a husband, then for children, then for grandchildren, and finally for one. They were your check stretched across a long month and your kitchen that refused to go silent. Tell me in the comments which one your grandmother made on a Tuesday in Detroit or Atlanta or Memphis. Cook one of these this week. Sit at your table. Eat slow. A small plate alone can still be a full life.